Okay, Alexander, we have got to talk about Poland. What a what a battle between Poland and the EU. Ursula von der Leyen, she told Poland, "We will not allow you to proceed with your changes in the judiciary." And it looked like Poland folded because Poland decided to come with a compromise and say they're going to create this discipline chamber that they were looking to do. They said, okay, we could do that in cooperation with the EU high courts. But it looks like the EU is not satisfied with that, and they're continuing to press Poland and the Law and Justice Party to scrap whatever judiciary reforms they're planning and to pretty much cede all power of the judicial to the European Union. And they're not budging. But now it looks like Poland is not budging. And the Polish premier, the prime minister of, I believe the prime minister or the president?
The prime minister.
The prime minister, yes, the prime minister, Premier Mateusz Morawiecki, has sounded off and told the EU that this is not workable and that Poland, and I'm paraphrasing, Poland is not going to give up its judicial sovereignty to the EU courts. And the EU has kind of thrown out a little bit of the Pole exit rhetoric that Poland might be leaving. Poland says we don't want to leave, but we want to keep our sovereignty. And actually, Morawiecki actually sent a letter to Brussels, and I'll read that letter in the next segment. But Alexander, your initial thoughts on what's going on?
What the Poles are trying to do, what the Polish government is trying to do, is, of course, it is aware that there is strong pro-EU sentiment in Poland for historic reasons. So it wants to appear as reasonable as possible on an issue where I don't think it feels it can compromise on the fundamental. And the fundamental is not the actual structure of the Polish courts, though that is a serious matter and one which I would have thought has, it's not part of the EU's business to interfere in a sovereign country's arrangements, judicial arrangements, but it's one that the EU repeatedly does. But what is the fundamental issue is that the Polish court has now said that where there is a clash between EU law and the Polish constitution, within Poland, it is the constitution which must prevail. The constitution is Poland's basic law, and if the constitution does not prevail, then Poland is no longer a sovereign, independent state any longer. It is a vassal, it is a province, if you like, of the EU. Now that conflicts completely against EU doctrine, which said that EU law prevails over all other law in any member state, including constitutional law. Now, there was a time in the 1960s when that doctrine that the EU has, the European Economic Community had, as it then was first enunciated, when it wasn't seen as a particular threat by member states, because in those days, the European Economic Community, as its name implies, was essentially a free trade zone with certain standards and regulatory bodies to operate that free trade system. But the EU today is not that any longer. It has become a kind of political, ideological enterprise. And what we see increasingly is that EU law is starting to expand, or has expanded very considerably, into areas of political interference and ideological interference in the affairs of member states. It takes particular views, as we know, on all sorts of identity questions. For example, we have to be very careful what we say for obvious reasons. This is not something that Poland, a traditionally conservative Catholic society, is particularly comfortable with. So they're saying, look, we can't accept this. This is fundamentally contrary to our constitution. We are prepared to accept the supremacy of EU law on those economic and commercial matters which were part of the EU's original remit, but we're not prepared to go all the way, subject the entirety of our law to your dictates, because if that happens, then we will cease to be a sovereign country, and you will impose upon us social values and social thinking that is inconsistent with our own. So that is the nature of the battle that is now being fought out. And what then happened is that, of course, the EU, which, as I said, has become a political stroke ideological enterprise, won't accept that. There have been all kinds of threats made to Poland. There was a furious meeting of EU leaders in which all the usual people, Mark Rutte, Emmanuel Macron, the Belgian Prime Minister, those sorts of people, they all came together, demanded that Poland be punished and brought into line. And there was clearly also, that was also the view of the Brussels leadership. But Merkel blocked it. She was not prepared to go down that route, and she was not prepared to take action against Poland. We will discuss why in a moment, but you can see the showdown that's emerging, and it's one in which it's going to be winner takes all. Either Poland collapses and accepts the whole apparatus of EU law, or the EU finds it impossible to bring Poland into line, in which case it's difficult to see how this union, as it is constituted today, can resist increasing fragmentation. Because if the Poles can pull this off, other countries will start to do the same.
Yeah, this is going to be an all-out battle. Polish Premier Morawiecki actually went to the Polish Constitutional Tribunal in Warsaw, Alexander, earlier this month, and he posed the question to them, and he said, if push came to shove and the EU law were ever to clash with the 1997 Polish Constitution, which would prevail? And the tribunal voted 12-2 for the Constitution. So he actually went to the courts to get their opinion, and they said, no, the Polish Constitution above everything. So you have that. Then you have Morawiecki actually sending a letter to the European Parliament, which I found very reasonable, but obviously the European Parliament and the technocrats in Brussels were probably furious with it. And in this letter, Morawiecki actually says that the gradual transformation of the EU into an entity that would cease to be an alliance of free, equal, and sovereign states and would instead become a single, centrally managed organism run by institutions deprived of democratic control by the citizens of European countries. That is how he described the situation. He is absolutely spot on. But you know what? He's calling out Brussels and the technocrats in Europe. He's saying, I know what you guys are looking to do, because that is exactly what they want to do. They want to move away from sovereign states, and they want to move into this blob orb that controls everything, whether it's financial, whether it's political, judicial, and soon military.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's calling them out.
Exactly, but of course the problem is that they do have the agenda that he said. So given that they have that agenda, they're confronted now by what they see as a rebel. And you see the rage. And the rage has just been extraordinary. I mean, people like Rutte and Macron and Ursula are absolutely livid with the situation. And they're very, very angry with Merkel because Merkel is blocking them from taking the massive actions against the Poles that they want to take. Now, the question is, as I said, how solid will Poland be in its defense? Because, of course, if Poland wins, other countries will follow. And incidentally, the country that will be in some ways the one to watch is Germany, because the German Constitutional Court has on more than one occasion actually said exactly the same thing as the Polish Constitutional Court has said. It said that where EU law contradicts the German Constitution, it is the German Constitution which must prevail. Otherwise, it's not a constitution anymore, and Germany is no longer a country. And that's what the German Constitutional Court has said. But in Germany, it has not had the backing of the German government. So these decisions of the German Constitutional Court have failed to gain traction. But if a decision like this made in Poland does gain traction there, then it serves as an example for many EU states, and you can think of all sorts of states in Eastern Europe. Slovakia is one possibility. Slovenia, by the way, is another. Hungary, obviously. But, you could imagine all kinds of EU states starting to sort of move in that kind of direction. Italy could move in that direction, conceivably. But in Germany itself, where there has always been this, great deference to courts, then, of course, if the Polish Constitutional Court is able to do that and make its decisions stick, if the German Constitutional Court says something similar in future, then it becomes far more difficult, if Poland has succeeded, for Germany, the German political class, to combine and reject it. So this is an incredible, this could be the start of something very big. And in fact, Ursula herself actually said that. She said that this decision by the Polish Constitutional Court, by the Polish government, is for the EU an existential matter. If Poland is able to win on this, then the future of the entire union is in jeopardy.
Well, the future of their vision for the union, because
absolutely
that's the key, and that's what Poland is saying. Yeah. Poland is saying, no, the union is not about all the power centralized in Brussels. The union is about sovereign states working together in solidarity. But they stress the word sovereign states, where Ursula and the people above and behind Ursula are saying, nah, all control is coming to us. And that's what this is about. Absolutely. In essence. This is the existential battle where we're either going to see an EU that is completely centralized into this orb, or Poland's going to win out. And we may even start moving in a direction where the European Union is what, in my eyes, was meant to be, which is sovereign states working together. But sovereign is the key. And that's what this is all about. And the EU is going to do everything it can to destroy Poland on this issue, because it is an existential threat. And they're going to start, we've always said this in many videos, they're going to start with cutting off financial support for Poland, which is valued at around 13 billion a year, and excluding Poland from the KUF recovery slush fund, which is around 60 billion. So, I mean, they're going to pull out all the stops to destroy the Law and Justice Party and to destroy Poland and to prevent this from happening. But if Poland stands strong and stands up for its sovereignty, then I think we may be looking at a very different European Union, going forward. Maybe a European Union that goes back to its original roots.
Well, indeed. But of course, I would say that a European Union that has evolved in the way that it has done might find it impossible to go back to its original roots. I mean, it seems to me that a more plausible thing, I mean, I agree, that is what the polls are saying. They say, look, let's go back to what we thought we all had, not to this monster, this Frankenstein's monster that's been unleashed on us. But that may not be practical anymore. And it seems to me more likely that if we do see this kind of thing, starting to unravel, then it won't unravel it won't stop at one point. It will all disintegrate, because it's like the bicycle. It has to go on moving forward, because if it doesn't now, it falls over. Once you launch yourself on the project of creating an EU superstate, it's very difficult to see how you can go back on it. I mean, I don't really think it's possible. But anyway, that's another question. That's a question for the future. But, that's absolutely right. And of course, if you're talking about what Ursula von der Leyen, all those people want, they do want to see that centralized superstate that the Poles are complaining about. That's what this whole thing is all about. And there are some people in Mark Rutte, for example, Macron, who want it to become that centralized superstate. And they want it also to become a centralized superstate that will impose all these social values and homogeneity and uniformity across the entire union. So from their point of view, given their vision, this is an existential threat, and they will do everything they can within their power to prevent it being realized. And, that's where the threats of sanctions are. Now, I have to say, Poland got a massive amount of help and support from the EU structural funds, and the importance of that is not to be overestimated. I mean, that made a dramatic difference to Poland's economic recovery in the 1990s. Poland also, at the same time, got massive debt relief. My own view is that the Polish economy has now gained critical mass to the point where it is no longer reliant to the same extent that it was on EU structural funding. So I think that this is less of a threat than it used to be. And as for the slush fund, and we called it a slush fund, many people are calling it that. Well, to be straightforward about it, the only people who would benefit directly from it within Poland are individuals. Polish society and the Polish economy would not. So again, if you're talking about the wider interests of Poland's society and economy, I think that this would not be a serious blow for Poland either. I think Poland could continue to grow and develop, and indeed if it left the EU, it might even start to find that there were other prospects and opportunities there for it too. But that brings us to why Merkel set her face against all of this, and why Merkel, in effect, sided with the Poles, to the astonishment of the EU leadership and to the dismay of many of the EU leaders. I mean, people like Rutte are absolutely furious with her, and why she took that step. And I think there are various reasons. Firstly, I mean, Merkel is definitely looking for life, beyond the Chancellery. And if she wants to become president of the EU Council, she probably calculates that she needs Polish support one day to do that. But beyond that, there are certain fundamental reasons. And this is that, from Merkel's point of view, this is becoming a very high stakes game, and she has to prevent, and Germany has to prevent, Polexit at all costs. And firstly, a lot of German businesses are now very heavily invested in Poland. A lot of German companies opened branch factories and things like that in Poland, and Poland has become a major source of light industry production for German companies, which they ship back into the EU. It will be a massive blow for the German industrial economy if they lost access to their Polish factories in that way as a result of a Polexit. It would be, in some ways, an even bigger blow than Brexit was, because while Britain is a major market for German goods, Poland is a major market, is a major source for actually making those goods and making subcomponents to these goods. So that is one thing. But then there is another factor, and this is where I think Merkel's background as somebody who lived in East Germany comes into play. Because from her point of view, and for the point of view of part of the German political establishment, the idea of Germany's eastern border no longer having beyond that eastern border a country that is part of the EU system is something that the Germans find absolutely horrifying. I mean, it apparently profoundly troubles them, partly given the history, but partly given the sense that, in that case, Germany would be losing the East. And, in the long term, they would also, I suspect, be afraid that an independent Poland might start making independent foreign policy decisions. And if it were to start edging towards Russia, which may seem unlikely today, but which is far from inconceivable, having some knowledge of Poland, I can definitely say that would be, for the Germans, an absolutely horrifying prospect. So for that reason, the Germans want to stop a Polexit at all costs, and they're doing everything they can. They're pulling out the stops as a result to prevent this issue escalating to the point of an outright crisis, and that's why Merkel intervened to block action against Poland at this time. But Merkel is likely to go before very long. the government that is most likely to replace her is likely to be fervidly pro-EU. They may not have the kind of long-term perspective which, for all her faults, Merkel does indeed have, and they certainly won't have the kind of background in East Germany that she did. And I have to say that it seems to me that an Olaf Scholz, pro-EU, left-wing government in Germany is much more likely to go down the road of punishing Poland than the present German government led by Merkel is.
Yeah, you always have to be careful with Merkel because she's very devious and very clever. But it sounds to me that for once in her political career, she is really putting German interests above the EU interests, because I completely agree with you. Germany cannot afford to lose Poland. The EU cannot afford to lose Poland, but Germany definitely cannot afford to lose Poland. And that's what Merkel is pretty much signaling. She's saying, look, Ursula, you can continue to make your demands and put forth your ultimatums to Poland, but as Germany, this is a no-go. We need Poland on side, and that's what it looks like Merkel is saying. And to your statement about Poland getting a lot of the money in the beginning when they first entered the European Union, I completely agree with you. But my final question to you is, that doesn't mean that you give up your judiciary just because you got money, whether it was to get you out of debt, whether it was structural funds or this new slush fund, this KUF slush fund. I mean, just because you get that money, it doesn't mean you have to give up your sovereignty and your judicial sovereignty as well. I think that's just too much to ask of a country.
It is completely unreasonable to ask, but it is the danger of dealing with the EU, because if you take their money, which of course Poland did, then they will demand a price, and the price that they will demand is complete subservience to themselves. It's the classic case that if you sup with the devil, you need a very long spoon. Poland in the 1990s, for very good reasons, supped with the devil. It didn't realise it was the devil. It took all that EU money. It actually helped Poland a lot. But it has now discovered the price that the EU exacts in return for that money. With the EU, everything always is conditional. And that's something that many people don't understand. To give you a sense of how conditional it is, countries which enter free trade agreements with the EU, which many countries around the world do because the EU is a large market, and they think, they can have free trade, what they then discover is that the European Court of Justice interprets the fact that they are trading with the EU on the basis of a free trade agreement as license to impose on those countries. And, we're talking about countries, like Argentina or Mexico or whatever. The EU's policies and ideas and regulations on green issues, carbon issues, environmental issues, they say that is implicit in all free trade deals. So, you give them an inch, they take a mile. And that's how the EU works.
Mm-hmm. I'll make a final statement, Alexander, on what you said. Yes, Poland took the money, but Poland, to its credit, invested that money and used that money wisely to build up its economy and to position itself to be more sovereign, and now to push back against the EU, where you can take a case like, say, Greece, which took that money, invested it poorly, very, very poorly, put itself into a massive amount of debt, and then came the EU bankers, which is what they kind of wanted in a way as well. Take our money, here you go. And the minute that Greece invested that money poorly and put itself into debt, the bankers said, all right, now we really got you. So you could also make the argument that the EU may even be a little bitter towards Poland from the sense that, you took our money, but you used it so wisely, and you built yourself up to a position of strength, and now our bankers can't come in and take advantage of you, where with other countries, we gave them the money, they spent it poorly, and we went in there and we took them over. You have that banker element to it as well, which I think they look at Poland and say, damn it, I wish we didn't give them that money. Then we would have had leverage over them because they actually spent that money well.
Absolutely. They also did something which is absolutely not to be underestimated, but it's absolutely critical, which is they didn't join the Eurozone. If they joined the Eurozone, that's when you really enter the cage. Because once you enter the Eurozone, which Greece crazily did, then there really is no escape. There is an escape, but you have massive turbulence if you decide to do it, and you open yourself up to direct control of your banking system by the EU Central Bank and all its all its various entities and organisations and familiars and all the rest. So that's something that Poland never did. It always retained its financial and monetary sovereignty. And that, of course, has put it, as well as the fact that it invested its money wisely, it's put it in a far stronger position with respect to the EU leadership than Greece was in. So, give the Poles credit where it's due. They've handled their affairs far more wisely than the Greeks have ever done.
I agree. All right. Go to the Duran.locals.com where you'll find all kinds of exclusive content in that community, as well as all our content that you see here as well. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code REALNEWS to pick up Duran merchandise. And you'll find all our videos on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, and Super U. You'll find those links down below. Take care.